Welcome to this deep dive on the Land of History official YouTube channel. So, I want you to imagine standing inside an ancient Egyptian tomb, over 3,000 years ago.
Yeah, picture the dim light. The air is just thick with the smell of myrrh and pine.
Exactly. And in that flickering light of the oil lamps, you see these priests. They're dressed in pristine white linen, and they are leaning over the body of a pharaoh.
Meticulously preparing it.
Right, and they're not just prepping this body to be buried and forgotten in the dirt. They're getting it ready to embark on, like, this impossible journey into eternity.
And the stakes there are absolute. I mean, their task is to achieve a state of biological stasis so perfect that human soft tissue will survive for millennia.
Which is just wild. So
Yeah.
today, we're unpacking how they actually pulled this off. Like, forget the Hollywood movie tropes of mummies chasing people around. We're getting into the real granular biomechanics.
The chemistry.
Yeah, the chemistry and the sheer anatomical genius that allowed these ancient priests to essentially hit the pause button on the natural laws of decomposition.
It really is arguably one of the most stunning scientific achievements of the ancient world. You are talking about people who, well, they didn't have microscopes.
Right, no germ theory.
Exactly. No germ theory, no modern refrigeration. But they still figured out how to completely arrest the process of putrefaction. They successfully weaponized the chemistry of the desert to ensure a human body would outlast empires.
And to understand why they went to such extreme, labor-intensive lengths, we kind of have to look at what they were actually afraid of. Because for you or me, packing for a long trip means, like, stressing over whether we brought the right shoes.
Or an extra phone charger, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But for the ancient Egyptians, they had to pack and prepare their own physical body. The body itself was the luggage for this eternal journey.
That's a really great way to frame it, actually, because it highlights the existential dread that was driving this entire process. To the ancient Egyptians, death was just a transition, but it was a highly precarious one.
Like a dangerous crossing.
Exactly. They believed human consciousness was made up of several distinct spiritual elements. Most notably the Ka, which was your life force, and the Ba, which was like your unique personality or soul.
Okay, so the Ka and the Ba.
Right. And after your final breath, those elements leave the body, but they stay tethered to it. They have to return to that physical body to anchor themselves.
So the preserved body is basically a spiritual landing pad, like a home base. And if that landing pad rots away, the Ka and the Ba have nothing to anchor to.
They are just stranded in the void.
Which meant oblivion.
Absolute oblivion. And the terror of eternal oblivion shaped 3,000 years of their culture. Preserving the physical form wasn't just a funeral tradition or a nice way to honor a memory.
It was survival.
It was the fundamental prerequisite for existence. If you don't have an intact body, you literally cease to exist.
Wow. Which puts the embalmers on this terrifying biological ticking clock.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the moment a person dies, biology turns against them. The cells begin to break down. Enzymes start digesting tissues from the inside out.
Yeah, the embalmers have to stop a freight train of decomposition.
Right. But what I don't fully grasp is, without an understanding of modern microbiology, how do they know exactly what was causing the body to break down so quickly? Like, how did they even know where to start?
Well, it was through centuries of brutal empirical trial and error. Because long before the era of grand mummies, Egyptians buried their dead directly in the hot, dry desert sand.
Which naturally desiccated the bodies, right?
Exactly. But when the elites started wanting fancy enclosed stone tombs, the bodies were cut off from that drying sand, so they rotted rapidly. The embalmers had to observe the mechanics of decay, and they quickly realized that putrefaction always started in the same exact place.
The abdomen.
Yes. The moist, bacteria-rich internal organs of the abdomen.
The gut microbiome. So the bacteria that help us digest food while we are alive suddenly run out of food when we die, so they start digesting us.
Exactly that process. It's known as autolysis. So the embalmer's very first critical intervention, which was performed in these specialized workshops near the Nile, was surgical.
Okay.
After washing the body with Nile water and palm wine.
Oh, wait, palm wine.
Yeah, the alcohol in the wine acted as an early antimicrobial agent. So after that, they made a precise incision on the left side of the abdomen. They had to get in there and extract the stomach, the liver, the lungs, and the intestines immediately.
And they treated those extracted organs with immense reverence, right? They didn't just toss them out.
Oh, not at all. They preserved them separately, placing them into beautifully decorated canopic jars. Each jar represented one of the 4 sons of Horus, who were these divine protectors.
So the organs get VIP spiritual treatment. But here's the part that trips me up. If you've correctly identified that internal organs are the biological enemy of preservation, why on earth would you leave the heart inside the chest?
It's quite the contradiction.
Right. And conversely, why go to such extreme, bizarre lengths to destroy the brain?
You've hit on the central paradox of Egyptian medicine here. Their astonishing mastery of anatomical structures was inextricably tangled up with a fundamentally flawed philosophy of human physiology.
So they were brilliant, but totally wrong about what did what.
Exactly. They left the heart exactly where it was because they genuinely believed the heart muscle was the center of human cognition. To them, the heart was where you kept your memories, your emotions, your intelligence.
So the heart is basically the hard drive. It holds all the data you need for the afterlife.
Precisely. Especially since their theology stated that the heart would be physically weighed on a scale in the Hall of Judgment against the feather of truth.
You definitely can't show up to court without your hard drive.
No, you cannot.
But if the heart is the center of everything, what did they think the brain was doing up there in the skull?
They viewed the brain as completely useless. In fact, some ancient medical texts suggest they thought its only function was to produce mucus.
Ew. Just a mucus factory.
Yeah, to them it was just wet, heavy skull stuffing that would eventually rot, so it had to be removed. But because they didn't want to disfigure the face of the deceased.
Because the soul needs to recognize its own body later.
Right. Because of that, they couldn't just cut the skull open. This led to a procedure known as excerebration.
Okay, let's get into the biomechanics of this because
It's
it is wild. I read that they went in through the nose. But, I mean, how do you surgically remove an organ as large and solid as the brain through a nostril blindly?
Well, it requires a profound understanding of cranial osteology. The embalmers would take a long, specialized metal hook, insert it up the nasal cavity, and deliberately punch through the ethmoid bone.
The ethmoid bone.
Yeah, specifically the cribriform plate, which is a very thin, porous bone at the roof of the nasal cavity, directly beneath the frontal lobe of the brain.
Oh, wow. So they punch through the bone, and the hook is now inside the skull vault. But the brain isn't a liquid. You can't just, pour it out of a hole.
Not initially, no. But human brain tissue is incredibly rich in fat and water. It's very fragile. The embalmers would essentially use that metal hook as a whisk.
A whisk, like you're making scrambled eggs.
Pretty much. By aggressively agitating the brain tissue inside the skull, breaking down its structural integrity, they literally liquefied it.
Oh, man.
Once the brain was reduced to a semi-liquid state, they simply turned the deceased on their stomach and let the brain drain out through the nose.
That is simultaneously horrifying and absolutely brilliant engineering. They essentially performed a localized blind blender operation just to preserve the aesthetic structure of the face.
It really is incredible.
And after they drain it, they wash the empty skull cavity out and pack it tight with linen or resin just to maintain the shape. I mean, they perform this highly complex neuronavigation just to throw the organ in the trash.
It highlights a fascinating cognitive dissonance. They perfected a technique that modern transsphenoidal neurosurgeons use today to remove pituitary tumors.
Wait, surgeons do that today?
Oh yeah, going through that exact same bone in the nasal cavity. Yet the Egyptians did it while completely misunderstanding the biological function of the organ they were destroying.
Okay, so the brain is drained and discarded. The digestive organs are safely packed in their divine canopic jars, and the heart is locked in the chest. You've removed the most immediate sources of decay.
Right.
But a human body is still, roughly 60% water by weight?
Mm-hmm.
Moisture is still hiding in all that remaining muscle and tissue, and moisture means bacteria. So how do you dry out an entire human body before it starts to rot?
This is where we pivot from biology to chemistry. The embalmers needed a way to completely desiccate the flesh, and they didn't use some complex, synthesized chemical cocktail. They used a naturally occurring mineral salt called natron.
Natron, and they just harvested that.
Yeah, directly from dry lake beds near the Nile.
But natron isn't just regular table salt, right? Why was it so uniquely effective?
Well, natron is a naturally occurring blend of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate.
Which is basically washing soda and baking soda.
Exactly, along with a bit of sodium chloride. So when you pack a body in natron, it does two critical things. First, it acts as a supreme drying agent through osmosis.
It pulls the water out.
Yes, it creates an extreme concentration gradient, aggressively pulling the water out of the body's cells. But second, because of those carbonates, it creates a highly alkaline environment, really spiking the pH level.
So it's not just drying the meat out, it's making the environment incredibly hostile. If any bacteria try to survive in there, the natron literally sucks the water out of the bacterial cells too, causing them to implode.
Exactly.
It's essentially the same chemical mechanism used to cure prosciutto or beef jerky, just, scaled up and weaponized against human decomposition.
That's the perfect analogy, honestly. The embalmers would completely bury the hollowed-out body in a massive mound of dry natron salt. They packed it inside the chest and abdominal cavities and covered every single inch of the skin.
And then what?
And then the active work stopped. The chemistry took over. For exactly 40 days, the body sat in that salt, completely untouched.
It's the elegance of the process that gets me. Modern embalming relies on injecting formaldehyde to cross-link proteins and temporarily delay decay. But the Egyptians used a pile of desert salt and 40 days of patience to fundamentally alter the cellular environment, so decay simply couldn't happen.
They permanently solved the biological problem. After 40 days of natron exposure, nearly all the moisture is gone. The bacteria are dead. You brush the salt away, and what is left is a perfectly desiccated body. It won't rot anymore.
Wow.
But it presents an entirely new physical problem for the embalmers.
Right, because if you pull all the water out of organic tissue, it becomes incredibly brittle. It's like a dried leaf. And if this person has to physically journey through the underworld, a fragile, brittle husk isn't going to survive the trip.
No, it would shatter.
It needs structural support.
Right.
And according to their theology, magical defense.
Exactly. This begins the transition from chemical preservation to religious fortification. The first step was to restore some suppleness to the skin and seal it against any ambient moisture in the air.
So they oiled it up.
Yes, the embalmers heavily coated the desiccated body in fragrant oils and hot liquid tree resins.
I was actually reading about those resins, and they weren't just for a pleasant smell.
Right.
Many of those coniferous tree resins are highly antimicrobial.
Like very much so.
So they are essentially painting the body with a waterproof antibacterial sealant that also acts as a natural glue.
And that glue is essential for the next most recognizable phase.
The wrapping.
Yes, the wrapping. And this wasn't a quick bandage job. The embalmers used hundreds of yards of fine linen strips, and it was agonizingly precise. Every individual finger was wrapped on its own, every toe wrapped individually, then the limbs, and finally the torso, building up layer upon layer.
Which creates a sort of composite material.
Yeah.
When you combine those layers of tightly wound linen with the hardening sticky resin, you're basically building a rigid exoskeleton.
Yeah, it's like ancient fiberglass.
Exactly. It holds the brittle body together in this protective shell.
A physical shell, yes, but also a spiritual one. Because nestled between those countless layers of linen, the priests systematically placed dozens of magical amulets.
Oh, like the charm.
Right. These were specific charms carved from stone or faience, like the scarab beetle or the Eye of Horus. Each amulet was placed at a specific anatomical location and was explicitly designed to protect the deceased from the demonic hazards of the afterlife.
Wow.
As the priests wrapped the body, they recited sacred spells to activate this spiritual armor.
It's just an incredible image. You are outfitting this traveler in a medical body cast to keep their physical form from shattering and simultaneously strapping them into a magical suit of armor to fight off underworld threats.
It was a very comprehensive defense system.
And once the wrapping is finally done, the royal mummy is placed inside a series of nested, beautifully painted wooden coffins, which are then sealed inside a massive stone sarcophagus.
Right. And this leads right into the final outfitting of the tomb itself. Because the body is just the vessel. The deceased still needs the infrastructure of daily life.
The ultimate, eternal packing list. The sources outline how these tombs were packed to the ceiling with everything you could conceivably want.
Oh yeah, wagons, furniture, jewelry.
Weapons, fine linen clothing. They packed lavish banquets of preserved food, board games to pass the time, and even mummified pets. I mean, they fundamentally believed that if you brought the physical object into the tomb, its spiritual counterpart would cross over with you into eternity.
Which brings us to the profound irony of this entire endeavor, because everything we have just discussed, the surgical organ removal, the brain liquefaction, the 40-day natron desiccation, the resins, the amulets, the furnished tombs, all of it was designed for an audience of none.
Right.
It was meant to be sealed in the pitch black, deep underground, never to be seen by living eyes again.
They were doing it exclusively for the afterlife. But, by mastering the chemistry and biology so flawlessly, those ancient embalmers accidentally achieved a completely different kind of immortality right here in the present day.
They inadvertently created the most detailed, intimate time capsules in human history. Because they halted the decay process so perfectly, modern researchers don't have to rely solely on fragmented pottery or eroded inscriptions to understand ancient Egyptian civilization.
We can literally look inside the people who built it.
Yes. It really is staggering when you think about it. Today, using non-invasive CT scans and DNA analysis, we can read the biological diaries of these ancient individuals. We don't just know their names.
You know their medical histories.
Exactly. We can identify atherosclerosis in their dried arteries, which tells us about their diets. We can see the wear on their joints, mapping their arthritis.
Wow.
We can find evidence of healed bone fractures, parasitic infections, and severe dental disease. We can trace genetic lineages across dynasties, identifying who was related to whom.
That is just wild.
We can even pinpoint the exact trauma or illness that caused their death thousands of years after the fact.
The science they used to secure their future ended up securing their past for us. So let's take a moment to look at the incredible arc of what we've covered today. It started with a ticking biological clock and the urgent surgical removal of the gut microbiome to stop autolysis. Right. It moved to the wildly paradoxical biomechanics of whisking the brain out through the nose while fiercely guarding the heart. We saw the chemical genius of weaponizing natron salt for 40 days to aggressively dehydrate the cells through osmosis.
And finally, the construction of a resin and linen exoskeleton.
Yeah, fortified with magic to protect a body perfectly preserved for modern CT scanners.
When you look closely at the mechanisms of mummification, it completely upends the modern assumption that ancient Egyptians were a morbid culture obsessed with death.
Yeah, they really weren't.
Not at all. You don't spend this much time, resources, and scientific ingenuity preserving the human form if you are just focused on lying. Mummification was, at its core, a radical, defiant act of love for life.
I love that.
They loved their families, their status, their food, and their physical existence so much that they engineered a way to never have to say goodbye to it.
They weren't worshiping death. They were actively fighting it with every chemical and biological tool they had. It really completely shifts your perspective.
It really does.
But before we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to mull over. The ancient Egyptians left us an unbelievably legible, physical record of their society. We know exactly what diseases they fought, what board games they loved, and what they valued most, all because their deepest beliefs required them to meticulously preserve their bodies and lock away their worldly goods. Now, project that forward. Imagine future archaeologists 3,000 years from now trying to understand our era. Today, the vast majority of our burial practices involve cremation, which destroys the biological record entirely, or natural decomposition, where we purposefully let the body return to the earth.
Right, ashes to ashes.
Exactly. We don't pack our graves with our smartphones, our favorite foods, or our pets. Without the aggressive chemical preservation of natron, and without vaults filled with the tangible artifacts of our daily lives, what will the physical evidence of our modern burial practices actually tell the future about us?
That's a huge question.
Will we leave behind anything remotely as enduring or as intimately readable as the ancient Egyptians did, or will we just disappear into the dirt?
Definitely something to think about.
So next time you are packing a suitcase for a trip, take a second to think about those priests in the dim light of a tomb, meticulously packing a human body to cheat time itself. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.